Thank you, Brother Mustafa. Yeah, I mean, this issue about apostasy is very big issue over here. Even the government was mulling a couple of years ago, I guess, about enacting this law called Faith Crime Act. They're trying to put people who have these ideas of converting out of Islam into kind of prison or concentration camp or something, or rehabilitation camp or whatever you want to say. This kind of idea is still predominant in basically in the what they call hierarchy of the government and the Muslim bodies in this country. I was during my inquisition by Jakim. I mean, this was the main issue that was being discussed.
The Ridda
issue. Was being discussed again and again and again, and they're not satisfied with my answer. I quoted that verse, and I quoted that verse 256 from beginning till the end. Even if you recite it till the end of the verse, it shows it must be a free will, right?
No compulsion.
Yeah, no compulsion. It's very clear about it, and there's so many other verses as well. But this is a current issue that we are facing nowadays, and it's good that you talk about it, because basically, in a way, it's, as I wrote in one of my press statement, this kind of act, preventing people who do not believe in a faith to leave a faith, is basically creating a community of hypocrites, of munafiq. It's as simple as that. Because faith is a matter of the heart, right? Like I used to say, the fabric of faith is the same. The fabric that made faith is the same fabric of love. It is fabric of love. You can't force love as much as you can't force faith. It's as simple as that.
You can't force hate, maybe. Sometimes.
Yeah, maybe, probably. Yeah. So, well, thank you, Brother Mustafa, and I would like to invite our first intervener, Dr. Mustafa, again. To you. No, you're the first. We have to change the sequence.
It rhymes, Mustafa and Mustafa.
Mustafa and Mustafa, yeah. Okay, please, thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Datuk Farouk for having me here to share my thoughts about the book. Well, this morning there was some kind of a intense debate about what liberalism is, or who liberals are. I suppose in the afternoon, seems to me that we have found a solution. I think liberals are those whose name is Mustafa. One of the things that attract me about this book is that the way the book is introduced, which is through the eyes of a child, i.e. Brother Mustafa Akil. It is through his childhood experience and exposure to Islam that we go through we go on a journey with him, in his discovery of Islam, i.e., as he mentioned earlier on, his grandfather was the one who taught him about Islam. And in this interaction with his grandfather, there's one moment, a disturbing moment in his childhood, when he read a hadith. I quote, "If your children do not start praying at the age of 10, then beat them up." This, as he mentioned in his book, horrified him, for he felt that how could religion like Islam condone violent act, a coercion, force. forcing children to pray is to him unreasonable. If they don't pray, then beat them up strategy haunts the writer, Brother Mustafa, especially as he digs further into Islamic literature, where he found more examples of oppression. For me, this introduction by way of a child, or through a child's eyes, has some significance. Yeah? Because, for one thing, it shows that a child's curiosity should be entertained. And for that matter, the curiosity of human being should be entertained and not be shunned, frowned upon, buried, or whatever. Yeah. In other words, a child, like any other person, adults, should have that freedom to ask, to inquire, only with questions that you be able to understand better, and in this case about Islam. Now for me, this childhood experience of Brother Mustafa strikes a chord in me. Now, not that I was beaten up by my father when I was 10 or whatever, but I would like to share with you an incident during my childhood days in school. It's something like when I was in primary 5 or 6, and it was a religious class, and I raised a question to the teacher. Unfortunately, I can't remember what the question was, but what I do remember is that the teacher responded by saying that you can't ask questions. You just obey, you follow what is taught to you. Yeah? That, like Brother Mustafa, troubled me because it implied that my religion doesn't really allow its followers to question, to be curious. Well, it may not be a big deal for some of us here, but for me, when I was a kid, it was. I suppose you could say that being shut up by your teacher is an adult equivalent of being slapped with a sedition act for trying to ask the right questions, or for merely trying to be curious about what happened to the country or to the society, or to be denied the access to, say, Sarawak Report or Asia Sentinel, for example. Yeah. So then we were told, as already mentioned earlier on, about Brother Mustafa's visit to military prison, where his father was imprisoned for 14 months. The father was detained not only because he was a member of the Nationalist Action Party, but also he was associated with the nationalist movement in Turkey. He also condemned, being part of this movement, all forms of authoritarianism. Yeah. And in 1980, to give you the context, the military staged a coup in Turkey and arrested all politicians and activists from all shades of opinions, and some were detained for many months without trial, and then released without any conviction. Sounds familiar, right? As a way of narrating the story, I find it also fascinating because Brother Mustafa not only talked about his journey, his initial journey in his childhood, but as time went on, he also makes the connection between his personal and the larger context, the community, the global. Yeah. And in here, he mentioned of his observation that all this cruelty, this injustice took place in Turkey, a Muslim majority country. But he cautioned to him it has nothing to do with Islam. So as a kid, he encountered tyranny. And on reaching the age of 17, among other things, the writer realized then that the Quran, again as already mentioned earlier on, doesn't stipulate rules and regulations and prohibitions pertaining to our daily lives, such as stoning adulterers, killing those who insult Islam, or for that matter, again already mentioned, the creation of Islamic State or global caliphate or religion police. It appears to him and to some of us that these prohibitions are man-made. He rightly argues that freedom of thought and liberty are nothing new in the world of Islam. Again, as mentioned earlier on, there was this group of intellectuals way before the closing of the gates of Ijtihad, the Mutazilites, who championed freedom of thought, free will, and who believe in no compulsion in Islam. And at that time, there were muftis who were daring and principled enough to speak truth to power. Something that is quite uncommon in some parts of the world. But these groups of intellectuals, Muslim intellectuals, had to contend with some vehement opposition from the traditionalists who call for literalist and conservative approach to Islam. Now, to give you a sense of how intense this ideological and theological difference between the people of tradition and the people of innovation, he quoted Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the founder of the Hanbali school of Islam. I quote, "The sinners among the people of tradition are God's friends," yeah, even though they are sinners. "But the pious ones among the people of innovation are God's enemies." That's the intensity of this conflict. Yeah? So it looks like, in this case, some people had already started playing God for quite some time ago. Yeah. The traditionalist approach to Islam is, as we are all aware, is pervasive. It has its political, cultural, and social implications. For instance, again, just to repeat what had been mentioned earlier on, women have been discriminated against in certain parts of the Islamic world. In certain societies, women and young girls are not encouraged to go to schools. A few even got shot for doing so. It is also unfortunate that certain elements of this traditionalist approach have found their way to some groups who resort to violence, all in the name of Islam. So what comes to mind in the modern day, for example, is the 7/11 terrorist attacks, the beheading of so-called deviants in certain parts of the Muslim world, Boko Haram's violent acts, the Taliban, who don't respect other people's religions. For example, the destruction of the 2 Buddha statues in Bamiyan, Afghanistan. These are indeed ghastly acts which would only reinforce the suspicion and perception that Islam is not compatible with democracy, liberty and freedom. And this is the very thing that Brother Mustafa is trying to do, which is to fight this perception of Islam being incompatible with democracy. These ugly faces of Islam, to be sure, are therefore not merely a Western media construct, because we hear of people saying, oh, it's just a media demonization of Islam. Partly true, but at the same time on the ground, you also have these people running around smudging the image of Islam. Apart from that, the negative stereotypes that are peddled, especially by the global media, may not necessarily come from the acts of violence such as terrorism. It is also brought about by certain inane religious proclamations or fatwas, which are good enough an ingredient to smear the name of Islam. Some Muslims are engaged in what you might call super narrative, as for example, thou shalt not do the poko dance, thou shalt not do the yoga, or accusing of certain groups of people as deviant, if not infidels, issuing fatwa to kill those who insult Islam. These are the very things that can and have generated Islamophobia, particularly in the West and elsewhere. I would contend that it's not that Muslims should put up a good face of Islam primarily to please the West and the others, but more than that, it's because Muslims must live the very universal values that are prescribed by the religion, such as justice, freedom, human rights, peace, and compassion. And to have that, we also need to have liberty, as Brother Mustafa has argued all along in his book. Yeah? Liberty of individuals and communities, I quote him, Muslims and non-Muslims, believers and unbelievers, women and men, ideas and opinions, markets and entrepreneurs. By doing so, he says, Muslim societies can promote their own modernity and lay the groundwork for the flourishing of good-centered religiosity. In promoting liberty amongst Muslims, I feel that it is also vital to highlight the importance of, for example, having strong democratic institutions, independent judiciary, for example, free press, among others. For it is only with this kind of environment that ideas can flow freely, ideas that are to be debated, to be shared, to be discussed in a civilized manner. You don't have to be mobs to promote your own ideas, yeah? That would be quite barbaric. in nature. At the time of writing the book, the writer felt that Islam was open to new interpretations. Brother Mustafa felt that Turkey is one of the places where there is ongoing silent Islamic reformation.
For 1 hour they asked me to wait. They didn't turn up to Congo, so we were busy next time.
That was when the book was being written.
2 weeks ago.
But over the years, in recent times, I wonder, yeah, whether
Constitutional democracy.
the environment is still there, or whether there is enough elements to help in this reformation. Yeah. Just to quote an example, or recent example, in Turkey, you had some 30 plus academics being arrested for having condemned the military crackdown on the ethnic Kurdish communities. To me, it's not only a curb on freedom of expression, but it is also something that is anti-intellectual. Yeah. You can't really have ideas flowing when you have this kind of environment. Yeah. And it doesn't really, I mean, it's not only about Turkey, it applies to other places as well, including this country. Yeah. It's much easier to ban books or to block certain sites, yeah, as mentioned in the morning, than to have dialogues, discussions, yeah, fruitful discussions. So, to me, looking at things in recent years, it seems to me there are still a lot of obstacles in the attempt to build an Islam without extremes. In other words, there seems to be still a lot of work to be done to achieve this goal. Thank you very much.